Well, Dave, week 3, UC Davis, big bad UC Davis.
Yeah, and we're trying to think of when the last time they had such a drop off in the level of competition was, and we think that USC, and then they played Lamar, right? And
Right, is that where Dennis McKnight came back to town?
all I remember was
I think McKnight was the most ferocious guy on Lamar's team.
the thing I remember about that one was that Hawaii won by about 50 points. So I don't know if they'll do that this week against Davis, but Davis is 0-2. They're making the big trip across the pond, and Hawaii's coming off of a game at Ohio State where the defense played pretty well, and the 38 points is kind of very misleading. Offense needs to get on track, though. At practice today, did you see anything that looked like that offense might be getting in gear a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think they're still getting over the jet lag because that's kind of a difficult trip, and as they're going to see in a week and a half when they have to go to Wisconsin. But it's a really difficult trip. I think you come off such an emotional high of playing so well defensively, and I think offensively they feel like they have hope because a lot of the problems were drop passes, fumbles, things like that, things that I guess are correctable. But again, you can't make mistakes against Ohio State and expect them to do anything.
Regarding those drops, do you think that was more nerves than anything, or?
I think so, and also I think that they have really good defensive backs because it looked like a lot of drops were also because they're covered so tightly. I mean, the window to the complete ball against when you're playing against maybe a Mountain West team is going to be a little bit different when you're playing against Ohio State.
I also feel like some of those drops are tough catches, and I come from the school of if you can get your hands on it, you should catch it. But some are more difficult than others, and Max throws a heavy ball. I think sometimes he does put a little too much on it. But when you're playing against a team like Ohio State, and these DBs are so fast, you do need to zip it in there. So it's I think there's accountability on both sides of that.
Right, and I think the thing with Max Wittick is he doesn't throw as hard in practice because the defense is, it's a little bit different when you're playing in the adrenaline and you're facing a defense team that's really on you. As Colorado and Ohio State really play tight coverages, so I think you're trying to get the ball in faster, so you're throwing a lot harder, and he's throwing a lot harder than I think that he does in practice, and I think maybe the receivers aren't used to it.
The MVP of this team from 3 years ago when he was a freshman is Ben Clark, and he's a little banged up. And is he still in that boot? Is there any chance he's going to play this week? What's the prognosis?
Well, Coach Chow said today he believes, and we're 3 days away from the game. He believes he's going to play, and Ben Clark's that kind of tough guy who believes he can play. I don't know if it's that essential. You don't want to say one team is not as worthy as the other, but I don't know if it's essential that he has to play this week. Maybe he needs time to rest it, but he claims he's going to go out there, and the guy has started every game of his career, so it's kind of tough to get him out of there.
Speaking of injuries and illnesses, these are the ones I get asked about the most. Diosemy St. Just and now Julian Jenner.
Jenner's okay. It turned out that his thing was not as complicated as they thought it was. He had blood in his urine, or he thought he had blood in his urine. It turned out it wasn't. It was a different type of problem he had. So he's okay. He's good to go. He practiced today. And Diosemy St. Just, I think it's going to be like another week. That's a bad hamstring. And problem is, if you've seen baseball players when they get it, that's probably one of the worst injuries for a speed guy, and it's tough to heal. And
I think it might be a little bit of a Wally Pipp situation, Lou Gehrig situation when you talk about making the baseball analogy, because even though he didn't really break away for any big games, I still like what I see from Paul Harris, and I think a lot of the fans agree with that. He's, I've heard him described as a scat back, but really he's actually pretty thick, right?
Yeah, and he runs inside. He's 5'11", 190, but he looks thin, but he can go inside. Mm-hmm. And the guy who loves to go inside is Melvin Davis, and I think if he can get his conditioning up, because he just wasn't in shape. I don't think he really thought he was going to become eligible, so he's focusing more on academics than the 3 months prior to getting here. He finally gets eligible, and he's a load to bring down. Trouble is, doesn't have a lot of energy. It's one of those like video games where your energy level is kind of low.
I felt like this is from the first game and then against Colorado, and then watching them on TV against Ohio State. I think this is might be the best tackling team I've seen at UH in a very long time.
Right, and I think it's because they play so aggressive. They're on you so quickly. And so a lot of teams have to break down and kind of wait for you to come. They come right at you, and they're in motion. Trouble is, though, you play that hard, you're going to get hurt a lot too. And they've been beat up, and they are causing problems for opposing teams, but they're also causing problems for themselves because they do have a lot of collisions.
They didn't cause any turnovers last week, and Ohio State, they're probably fairly good at not making them since they're number one. But I wonder if this strategy, or not strategy, but actually the way you're supposed to play and making these short tackles, if that, they're not really, if they're not trying to strip the ball, or if that's just, they just haven't had the fortune of it yet, or.
Yeah, I think when you're trying to tackle Cardell Jones, it's 6'5", 240, 250. Yeah, I think just getting to him and holding on to him until the cavalry comes in. I think that's one of the things. But I think they had some chances to make interceptions, and they don't drop in practices, but they did drop in these games. And again, if you get an opportunity like that, you got to make it, and they didn't make it.
There was a segment of the kind of early in the game, right after Ohio State scored their first touchdown, and Hawaii 5 running plays in a row, and nothing with any real misdirection or anything. And I know I'm not alone in being a little disappointed in that. And like in particular, there was a second down and 1 where they just kind of went up the middle. And I understand about establishing the ground game, but I think when you're 40-point underdog, you got to kind of take some chances. And, I don't know what you feel about that, or if you what you feel about the way the plays are mixed. Because we're kind of told that this is going to be a kind of a wide open offense, and I don't know if we've really seen that yet.
I think they try to go wide open. They spread. They go from number to number. They try to spread out. They try to do things. I think several times they went no back, but unfortunately, a couple times when they went no back, that's when the sacks happened. I think that's one of the problems we learned with the run and shoot is it's a game of numbers. You can't have more guys attacking you than trying to block. And you're right. And if you're not getting separation, and it's hard to get separation against good defensive backs like they faced against Ohio State, then it's hard to really get things going. And I guess probably the safer way was to go and try to hold on to the ball and prevent turnovers. But you're right. I think against UC Davis, you're not going to have the matchup problems that you had, and I think they're going to really open it up, or should open it up.
Okay, so we expect to see a little bit more wide open, and do you think there'll be kind of the tempo will be a little faster too?
I think so, and it just depends on how the UC Davis. I imagine UC Davis is going to try to slow the game up. They're kind of interesting. Their coach comes from a run background, but they've actually tried to open them past it. But I think they're on the road, and I don't care what kind of crowd you get in Hawaii. When Hawaii fans get going, it gets kind of loud, and that's pretty disruptive, especially for UC Davis. I don't know what kind of numbers they played before, so I think it's going to be a benefit to Hawaii in this game in terms of pace and matchups.
Well, they're 0-2 this year. They've got their next win will be the 500 for their program. They've got 2 wins against FBS schools. They beat Stanford in 2005. When I don't think Stanford was very good then, and they beat San Jose State in 2010. Now, do you recall? Well, I remember Hawaii did play them a few years ago. I don't remember the score, but I know Hawaii won fairly handily.
Yeah, I think Hawaii did. I think that might have been the game where Brian Moniz might have thrown 7 touchdowns and would have set the school record, I think, with an 8th in the first half, except the offensive coordinator held the record for 8, so that wasn't going to happen.
And then the only time that I recall Hawaii losing to an FCS team was that Florida Atlantic wasn't FCS. They were
right on the Hail Mary throw.
Right, would have been Portland State, and that was a big upset. And I think it upset June Jones quite a bit because that was his alma mater, and that was the coming off of the great 1999 turnaround season. There was so much hype for that Hawaii team, and do you see any kind of letdown because they're playing a team from a lower division?
No, I think their goal, and they don't really say it, but even we look at it. The first 5 games, they have to win at least 2. They've got 1 in the books, and I mean it gets tough. They're going to go to Wisconsin after this. They're going to go to Boise State. So I think they needed to win at least 2, and this has got to be the second one because if they don't pick up this one, it's going to be very tough to pick up the second one against Boise or Wisconsin on the road.
Okay, the team isn't supposed to look ahead, but we can a little bit. And what's interesting about Wisconsin and Boise is that both of them have lost games already. And so I'm not going to say it yet, but that's something to maybe think about, after this game. And and see how those two teams do, and then then you can consider them those games to be possibly winnable games.
Yeah, I think, well, at least computable games.
Right.
And I think you're right. But it's always tough when you go to Wisconsin, and again, trying to fly, whatever, 4 or 5 time zones, and Boise on that blue turf. And I mean, I don't know if it has an effect, but it seems to have like some kind of a mental effect. And not just so much that their blue home jerseys seem to blend in with the blue turf, but they wear these really light gray numbers. So I think even scouting, if you're just looking at the videotape to scout them, they're hard to find out like who's who, because you can't really see the numbers, especially from you've seen the press box that's way up high, and that's where they're shooting from. So.
Well, their quarterback is young, and if their offensive line isn't up to par, I think this Hawaii defense can rattle them a little bit. Well, so anyway, I'm going to say Hawaii 35, UC Davis 10.
Yeah, I don't know what the score will be, but it'll be a lot to not very much. So I think Hawaii will win by a lot.